starting off, obviously, if we're going to be doing anything about the holiday of Passover, we have to remind ourselves what
We built that.
the story was all about. Or did we? My grandfather had chronic back pain, and he claimed it was from building the pyramids. Not sure if that's historically accurate. But what was the Pesach Passover story in 30 seconds? We're all pretty familiar to some degree or another. We had the Jewish people enslaved in Egypt. Slavery was getting worse and worse. Finally, there was a series of miracles where we were introduced to Hashem, to God, and God freed us from Egypt. We were able to leave. As a matter of fact, it happened so quickly that we didn't have time to prepare elaborate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We had to just grab granola bars and run. And the granola bars are known as matzahs because of this bread that didn't have time to rise. We run with it. We get out. We're free. Egyptians change their mind, try to corner us by the sea. Sea splits. We go through. They say that looked cool. They try it. Sea comes crashing down. And we have been fully liberated from our oppressors. And we're able to go, get the Torah, and eventually go into the land of Israel. And that is the story of Passover, as we all know and hopefully love it. Question is, imagine that you are a PR team that's hired to take the holiday that was established to celebrate exactly that story that we just said. So you're the PR team, you're gathered for a meeting, you have to try to figure out, how are we going to name this holiday? We got to give it a name. You can't just say, hey, the holiday of that 30-second story Rabbi Marcus just told, right? Got to give it a name, got to do some branding. So what would you call that holiday?
Exodus.
The holiday of the Exodus. Okay, very good, right? That's what happened. We got out of Egypt, and it's always great to have some sort of Greek word to describe exactly that. So that would be Exodus, the holiday of Exodus. Any other suggestions? Not that that wasn't a good one?
Well, it's from the Parsha.
Right. I mean, the Christians named the second book of the Bible Exodus because of exactly that, the fact that we got out. So that would be a great option. But we're all here in the meeting. We want to hear everyone's suggestions before we pick one. So any other suggestions? What would you name that holiday, the holiday celebrating that story? Okay, the holiday of... Okay, great. We'll get to that in a minute. Any other suggestions? Independence Day. Very good, right? We were an enslaved nation, and then we got our independence from the Pharaoh. As a matter of fact, the founding fathers like to make their own comparisons between the King of England and Pharaoh. So that
there's a portrait of Moses in the Capitol.
There you go, right? So we call it Independence Day. It was our Jewish independence. Any other suggestions before we do a quick vote?
Moses.
The holiday of Moses. Let's take the leader, put him on a pedestal, say, wow, look what Jewish leadership can accomplish. Any one of you can become leaders. Let's celebrate that. Great. Any final suggestions before we wrap up the meeting? Okay, great. So surprisingly, the choice that the Torah has on how it names its holiday, we're all familiar with the holiday of Passover, Pesach, but that is not really how the Torah refers to the holiday. The Torah uses the word Pesach in reference to the offering that was brought on the holiday itself. But as you said before, the Torah actually calls it the holiday of matzah, the holiday of unleavened bread. Right? So if we go back to the story, I'm like, okay, was that actually in the story? Yes, it was, because there was the granola bars we had to grab. We didn't have time to make sandwiches, right? So yes, it's definitely in the story, but most people in the meeting are not going to pick that as the name of the holiday. It's a random detail in the story, and it doesn't seem to be what the story is really all about. Freedom, the Exodus, the independence, the leadership, all of those things are great examples of aspects of the story that are much more central to the story itself rather than the holiday of matzah. Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of matzahs. So to understand why the Torah does that and doesn't call it, let's say, the holiday of freedom, as Rabbi Garfinkel said, we need to take a closer look at what freedom actually means to the Torah and explore that at greater length, and then I think everything will come together. So let's take a look at the Torah describing freedom. Okay, so a little background for this verse. There's lots of different philosophies on how an economy should run. Should it be micromanaged? Should it be free market? The Torah actually has an interesting hybrid kind of thing where it's kind of pretty much a free market, but there are safeguards within the market, that very unique safeguards that prevent society from devolving into different forms of serfdom or different things that happen to free agricultural societies. So one of these safeguards that are there is something called the Yovel, the Jubilee. And it's very interesting and unique. And what that is that every 50 years, the economy has a reset button that kicks in as far as ancestral land is concerned. So if your family had a field that was like the basis of the stability for your family, making sure that they had independence, and you went through really hard times and you had to sell your land, the most you could sell it for was up till the 50th year of this cycle. So that way, no matter how much pressure was being put on you, you would not end up selling your land and then eventually working that land as a serf for some landlord, which is what happened all over Europe because of the lack of this system in place. So when the Torah is describing it, the Torah says, you shall sanctify the 50th year and proclaim freedom throughout the land. So this freedom is the fact that people can then move back into their old homes that they had on these farms or whatever it is. And it's also freedom because if somebody decided to sell themselves into servitude, which is something that people once upon a time there was a market for. So primary example of when the Torah actually encouraged that, but it's part of a bigger discussion, is somebody who was stealing and wasting the money that they stole, and now they need to pay back the people that they stole from. So there's a way that they can sell themselves into up to 6 years of servitude and use that money to pay back the loan. It's a tricky thing to buy a servant like that, because as the Talmud describes it, when you buy that type of servant, you're basically buying a master for yourself because of the amount of rules and regulations that there are in how you treat this person. You can't give them labor that's degrading. You can't make them work if you don't actually, for things that you don't actually need just to keep them busy. You can't, if you injure them, they're free. If you have one pillow, he has to get the pillow, not you. It's a very, the Talmud calls it buying a master for yourself, because really what you're doing is it's like part of like a forced reintegration into society where you're making this person live with a family that's very well-meaning and inspired to try to help people, because you're not going to buy this servant unless you're actually trying to help him, because it's not necessarily financially always worth it. Yes, Martin?
The same thing that you told us with the ear thing.
Yeah. So if, let's say, after 6 years, the guy's having such a great time, where the Torah says, now it's time to leave, and he says, but I don't want to leave. It's like, but you all only got paid for 6 years. Like, I insist. So the Torah says there's a unique ceremony where they can extend up until the Jubilee, whenever that happens to be. It could be in another 5 years, it could be in another 40 years, but that's the most they can extend to. But as Marty's saying, there's this unique ceremony they have to go through where their ear gets pierced. And the reason why you do that is because the message we're trying to tell him is that you're not meant to be a servant. You're meant to be a free person. Your ears were at Mount Sinai, at least collectively, because the entire Jewish people were there, and heard the fact that you were supposed to be servants of God, not looking for human masters to serve. So clearly you didn't internalize that. That's why we're giving him a piercing message to the ear. But that's the most he can extend to. And then when the 50th year comes, he is free whether he likes it or not. He is forced into freedom. He can no longer be in this arrangement, and he is totally free. So that's freedom. The word the Torah uses to describe that freedom is dror. Okay? Ukratem dror ba'aretz. So what is that word? It's the first time that word appears in the Torah. So whenever you have a word appear for the first time in the Torah, Rashi comes to the rescue, and he says, said Rabbi Yehuda, what does the term dror mean? It's as one who dwells in a dwelling, like a dira is an apartment in modern Hebrew. So it's the same root of dar, to live. And so dror is one who dwells wherever he wishes and is not under the domain of others. So that's the term dror denotes freedom. So we have this word dror that means freedom because you could basically go wherever you want and do whatever you want. So, yeah.
Freedom is kind of in the first Leviticus paragraph. Freedom is in this context that, in my mind, doesn't really exist much anymore today. Would you say that there are parts of this that still is at play in our current society, or is it mostly just an interpretation?
So this verse doesn't necessarily apply practically because you cannot sell yourself into servitude anymore. Please don't try it. And we also don't have the Yovel, the Jubilee thing in Israel where you have this reset button. But the word definitely applies, meaning it's possible to either have or not have this type of freedom where you can go wherever you want, do wherever you want. Matter of fact, there's a country in the Middle East where I come from that is struggling with this issue. I don't know if you've been following, but people in Iran are, many of them were demonstrating for freedom, right? The freedom they were demonstrating for was the freedom to be able to do whatever they want and not be told by a theocracy what you can and cannot do, and they feel like they're being oppressed, right? Hence, you have someone in Tehran draped in an American flag, which represents freedom to many people because of the American ideal of freedom, with a sign in big that says freedom. And if you're wondering how he was brave enough to walk around Tehran draped in an American flag, well, there were very many brave people who did things like this. It happens to be this is AI generated, so that definitely helped. Which is why this guy's sign in Persian says, I love Olami 613. So that's a little bit of a giveaway that this is not actually taking place in Tehran. That's the 613 there in red. No, it's not.
It looks
I have
that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
agents who can help me with those types of things. So you see someone who does not have dror campaigning for dror and using a symbolism of dror, which is American freedom. America was established, like you said, independence, right? American independence was established on this ideal of not having a government breathing down your neck, telling you what you can and cannot do, where you can and cannot live, what professions you can and cannot have, right? That is the American freedom that this person is generated to look like he's demonstrating for. So that is dror. There are other words in the Torah to describe freedom. So let's take a look at the next verse. And the next verse is describing the moment that Moses is coming down from the mountain with the tablets of the Ten Commandments. And as he's coming down, the Torah pauses for a second to just reflect on this moment. And the Torah says, the tablets were God's handiwork. So these tablets that he's holding were God's handiwork, and the script was the script of God engraved on the tablets. Now, of course, the tablets did not look like the faded ones in the background here. They were made out of stone, and they had the script of God engraved on the tablets. Now, why did I bring this verse that seems to not be talking about freedom? Because if you look in the Hebrew, it says, "V'haluchot ma'aseh Elokim hema." These tablets were the handiwork of God. "V'michtav michtav Elokim hu," and the script was the script of God. Charut al haluchot. Now the word charut in Hebrew means, if you look in Google Translate, it means engraved, right? Which is why it says over here engraved, right? Any issues here with
There's a tet instead of a top.
that is called being an observant Jew, right? We have, it's spelled with a tuf over here, and tough luck, it is spelled with a tet over here. Why is it misspelled? So whenever we have an issue in the text, who's coming to our rescue? Rashi once again to the rescue. Says Rashi, the word cheret with the letter tet and the word cheret with the letter taf are related. Says Rashi, I know you're concerned that we have a typo, we have a misspelling in the Torah. Don't worry. You can still technically spell the word engraved with a taf, and it counts. It's obscure, it's not the regular way to spell it, but it still counts. As a matter of fact, if you look back at Google Translate, down here it says, charut, you can do it with a taf. It's legal. We're good. We're safe. Okay? So Rashi to the rescue. We are okay. We don't need to send the Torah back to the editor. No typo. Yes?
Wasn't it a different type of engraving that it went all the way through the tablets and then it was seen on both sides, which was different than just regular engraving?
Still, we would translate that as engraving. Maybe we would call it really cool engraving. Maybe we would call it godly engraving. But there's no word for that, which is why we're using the word engraved. But Rashi was just bothered about the typo. And Rashi tells you we're still okay because there is an obscure way to type it that involves a taf and is technically legal. Any questions on that, Rashi? Yes?
Is there no connection to any of the signs? Because if you look at the Torah, there's a deeper meaning behind the signs and the symbols within the actual Torah. Is there not something connected to that that made it a text in the Torah?
So I feel like you're bothered by something and you're trying to answer it with your answer, which is a beautiful answer. But is there something? What's wrong with Rashi's explanation? Hey, it says engraved. Technically, this is fine. What was that?
It's hard to take it at face value, but if he says it's what it is.
Why is it hard to take it at face value?
So trust me, it's all good.
Oh, Google agrees, right? You don't have to take Rashi's word for it. Google says there's another spelling. It brings it all the way down here, but it's a spelling that works. You want to know what it says? It says charut. You want to know if you're going to get a bad mark in your grammar because of it? No, because technically it's illegal. You can use this for Scrabble. You can use it for bananagrams. It's legal, right? We're okay. But I think the reason why you guys are coming up with like deeper explanations because something's bothering you, which is that there's another way to write this that will not cause any issues. And it's actually writing it with a tet. Like, why didn't the Torah just write it with a tet? Like, is the Torah worried about Rashi going out of business if it writes it with a tet? Like, write it with a tet. I won't be wondering why you used an obscure spelling because you didn't. Just use the most common spelling. Why go in your drawer to look for some sort of obscure spelling to pull out for the word here, right? Which is why you were saying, so there must be some sort of deeper meaning going on, because if not, then why wouldn't you just write it with a tet, right? So the one who's sensitive to this question actually predates Rashi by many, many years, and that is the Mishnah, predating Rashi, all the way back to Second Temple and earlier, because this is the oral Torah as we got it at Sinai. And the Mishnah explains, Rabbi Yehuda ben Levi said, the verse states, the tablets were God's handiwork, and the script is the script of God engraved on the tablets, right? Charut ala luchot. Do not read it as charut, which means engraved. Rather, read it as cherut, which means freedom. Meaning, you want to know why the Torah chose to spell it with a taf? Because that actually has a double entendre. It has two meanings. Once you spell it with a taf, yes, it means engraved, but it also means freedom, cherut. Yeah?
So is this just like the one part where it's don't read it as builders, but as your children, or vice versa?
Right, meaning the Torah will sometimes write something in a certain way so that you can have the surface level meaning, and like Saul said, there's a deeper meaning, and that's what the Torah is hinting by using the specific wording, the specific obscure spelling. It's giving you a message, there's something deeper, take a closer look, and then you'll find that it's trying to tell you freedom. So what's the word freedom doing in the description of these tablets of the Torah that are first being introduced to mankind? So the Mishnah goes on to explain, for there is no one as free as one who engages in Torah study. Why is the word freedom on these tablets? To teach you that is as free as you can get. So if I were to ask you to sit back, close your eyes, and imagine the freest, it's a clean slate, right? Imagine the freest person possible. I bet you the image that comes to your mind looks something like this, right?
See, it looks like AI.
A guy, obviously with an Olami 613 kippah, studying Torah, right? As long as you don't take a close look at what these books actually say, right? But he's studying Torah. That's the freest person. Obviously nothing like this guy over here, right? This is not what we think of free, just chilling on the beach, drinking. No, the guy who's pouring over the... actually, no, I don't think so. If I were to close my eyes and imagine the freest person, it would probably look a little more like this than this, especially if you do look at the words of the Torah. The words of Torah are not about how you should just run across open fields, frolicking with the dandelions or whatever, right? It's about like, oh, don't do this, do a little bit of that. Oh, make sure you don't have any chametz on Passover, not even a crumb. Make sure you eat this much matzah. It's lots of do's and don'ts, not exactly our image of the epitome of what it means to be free. So why did the Mishnah say that there is no one as free as one who engages in Torah study? And to understand what this is, we have to notice this is not in competition with the freedom we spoke about earlier, the Dror freedom, as we called it, that freedom to live wherever you want, do whatever you want, that freedom that the Iranians were marching for, freedom that the American founding fathers established the country for, right? It's a different word. We had that was Dror. Now we're being introduced to a freedom called Cherut. And this freedom, for some reason, shares the same spelling as the word charut, which means engraved, right? Which is very interesting, because when you engrave something, like there's lots of different forms of art. My grandmother was very into sculpting. It's like taking stone and coming up with artistic shapes in the stone. And this beautiful art, but it's not a very free flowing art. It's a very specific, you take the rock and you lock it into a specific shape and it's stuck in that shape. You're carving out parts of the rock, and that's what it is. You could take a stone slab and you carve in a poem in the rock, and that could be a beautiful poem, but you've locked it into that. It's not like a very free form of art, right? So engraving doesn't sound very free, and studying Torah doesn't necessarily sound very free, and yet the Torah tells us that there's actually some sort of deep form of freedom in there. So how can you have a freedom that involves carving out things? I think a great example can be illustrated by when I was looking to move into the house that I live in. We had to bring in an inspector to go through the house and try to see if there were any issues before we closed on the house. And he was going through. It was a lot of fun to follow him. I felt like I was following Sherlock Holmes or Hercule Poirot, if you know these. It's a little more niche than Sherlock. But he's looking for different clues. Oh, if you have this dust over here, it could mean that there's this type of infestation or whatever. It was a lot of fun until we got to the crawl space. When we got to the crawl space, I told him that I would guard the entrance and he should take it from there. And he goes in, he comes out 10 minutes later, dusts himself off. I say, so, what do you say? And he said, we have a problem.
The entire life, he said.
Oh, no.
Last time he told the story.
So we'll see if it's changed. So I asked him what the problem was. He said that there's a pillar in the crawl space that's holding up your living room, and between the pillar and your living room, there's actually an inch space. So if there's a tornado, I will no longer be in Kansas or West Rogers Park, right? Pretty big problem. I told him, okay, I guess we're back to the drawing board. I should find a new house. And he said, no, you just have to go get any sort of inch-thick piece of wood, metal, whatever it is, wedge it in there, and you're good. I'm like, really? You're kidding, right? He's like, no, 100%. Just get anything that's an inch thick and go ahead. So luckily enough, I had a MacBook Pro that was exactly an inch thick, And the older ones used to be an inch thick. They've gotten thinner now. And I'm like, okay, I'm good. I can get a house. All I have to do is wedge my MacBook in there. Especially since when you're talking about buying a house, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not like in the bigger scheme of things, like a $1,500 or $2,000 MacBook should not be a deal breaker, right? So what do you think? Should I do that or not? Sydney did not look impressed. It sounds good? She got it.
Just get a block of wood.
So I'm the owner of the MacBook. It's a free country. I can do whatever I want. It's totally mine. No one's going to tell me what to do with my MacBook. And I'm totally free to use that MacBook any way I want, including sticking it in a crawl space. But Sydney is trying to send me to Home Depot because in order to free the laptop to be used for its true potential, I need to first start by carving out bad options for this MacBook. So I need to say, before I can say, yes, I'm going to use it for this, I need to say, I'm not going to have it stuck in my crawl space. I am not going to use it as a booster for my kids when they eat spaghetti. I am not going to use it as a frisbee for entertainment, right? So no MacBooks were hurt in the creation of this picture. So, right, only after I've said no to all these really terrible choices that I can use my MacBook for, only then I freed up my MacBook to achieve its true potential, which is obviously presentations like this, right? I cannot be giving this presentation if my MacBook is stuck in the crawl space or destroyed in a game of frisbee, right? So to free the MacBook to be used for its true potential, I need to to carve out bad options. You have a slab of stone and you want to make sure that it's free to be used for something meaningful, you have to carve out bad options that you could be using with this slab. So when you carve a poem, what you just did is you made sure that it would not be used for a bazooka joke. Has anyone here ever read a bazooka joke? I'm not done. That was funny.
No.
No.
The cum is also hard as a rock.
In Hebrew or English?
It's in Hebrew.
I haven't found a funny one in either, right? I think it's part of their system, like buy another one, maybe that one will be funny. But imagine you took a beautiful slab of marble and you carved a bazooka joke into it. That would be destroying that marble, right? So instead, once you use it for something really meaningful, even though it's limiting, but it's actually freeing it from all the bad options it could be used. That's how you see the connection, how carving, even though it's nothing like that other type of freedom we spoke about, the American freedom of doing whatever you want, it's more limiting than that, but it's also different in how it frees you. It frees you to achieve your true potential. Now, both of these words are in the Torah because they're both very important forms of freedom. It's not either or. It's not that, hey, we love cherut, we hate dror. We disagree with the Iranians marching in the street. They're wrong. They should be asking for cherut, not for dror. No, it's very important to be able to do whatever you want, to be able to not be limited, to not be stuck, and to be able to do whatever you want. And then you have to understand that doing whatever you want is not the same thing as achieving your potential. It's an opportunity to achieve your potential, but then you have to take another step, which is saying, now I am going to limit myself from bad options of what I can use my freedom for so that I am actually going to achieve my potential. So a great example of where you can see this in real life is someone who is locked in jail. Okay, someone who's incarcerated, they do not have which type of freedom? Drawer. They cannot go wherever they want, they cannot live wherever they want, they cannot be whatever they want, right? And then they are finally free and they've achieved drawer, and that's a beautiful thing. But if you look at the statistics, there's about a 30% chance that anyone who was freed will end up being reincarcerated within, I don't remember what the time span is, maybe 3 months, right? So when they left jail, they left saying, that was terrible, I finally have my freedom, I don't want to ever be back there again. And yet for some reason, so many of them end up back there within 3 months. Why is that? What it shows you is that even though they were granted dror, they were granted the freedom to go wherever they want and do whatever they want, they were not granted this other thing called cherus, which is the ability, the inner strength and fortitude to say no to damaging decisions that are going to cause them to reincarcerate. It could be an addiction, it could be a social life, it could be lots of different things that cause them to be stuck in this cycle of being reincarcerated, which means that while they were walking around free for those 3 months, they had freedom, but it was only one type of freedom and not the other. They were never granted cherus. All they had was dror. So you see that play out, that difference between these two forms of freedom. So now an interesting short detour that's going to wrap everything together. The Talmud discusses how after people were done their silent prayer, these different sages had this own personal prayer that they would add at the end. And the Talmud lists the different personal prayers. They're beautiful. And I want to quote this one by Rabbi Alexander. Rabbi Alexander, after he prayed, would say the following. This is all year round, not a specific holiday or anything. He would say, Master of the universe, it is known and revealed before you that it is our will to do your will, right? Deep down, we all want to do the right thing. We don't always live up to that, but you know that deep down we want to. So what's our excuse? Who prevents us, right? So this better be good. Why are we not perfect? Why do we make mistakes? Who prevents us, okay? The yeast in the dough and the subjugation of the non-Jewish nations, okay? Let's start with the second one, because it's a little easier to understand. Very often, we're in situations where there are anti-Semites that prevent us from doing the wrong thing, okay? You know, there's people in Israel, they want to go study Torah, but there's people who are firing rockets at them, and it's unsafe, they have to stay home. So you say, Master of the universe, I want to be in synagogue right now praying or studying Torah, but, you know, there's a war going on, I can't make it, okay? Not bad as excuses go, right? If you brought that to school because you were late one day, they, pretty good. But the first one is a strange scapegoat or scapegoat. Is that a thing? Right? Like, this guy? Really? Like, he's the source of, imagine Hitler in Germany. The source of all our woes, the source of all our problems. It's the
East.
The dough, the yeast in the dough. The yeast in the dough, that's why. Like, is this like because of terrible indigestion or something? Or is it really secretly like a scary monster? Like, is that what's going on? You don't see, you have to have the right glasses to appreciate how dangerous the dough is. Like, what's actually going on? Okay? So, we're going to take another short detour, and then everything will wrap together. We're going to go back to the very beginning of the Torah and of existence itself. So this is the description of God creating things, and it says, Now Hashem God had formed out of the ground every beast of the field and every bird of the sky and brought them to the man to see what he would call each one. So we have the description of God creating animals, creating birds, creating all the living creatures aside from man, and the word used is formed, or in Hebrew, vayitzer. Okay? Now let's compare and contrast that to the verses describing the creation of man. Let's see. Right here, this is just a few verses later. And Hashem God formed the man of dirt from the ground, and he blew into his nostrils the soul of life, and man became a living being. So you see the description of the creation of man, and it uses the same word, formed, to describe both of those things. You can see it in Hebrew as well, vayitzer and vayitzer. So, aside from you, anyone notice anything different between the description of the word used to describe creation of man and creation of animals?
One has the word had before and one doesn't.
Okay, that would be in the English. How about in the English, though, the word formed is exactly the same, formed and formed. How about in the Hebrew? Vayitzer. Nice. So the words are pronounced exactly the same, vayitzer and vayitzer. But here, to make the sound E, the vowel, is this little dot right here in the vowels. Here, while it still has that dot for the vowel, it also added an extra vowel that doesn't change the sound or meaning of the word, but it's just there. Again, like we saw earlier, it's not grammatically incorrect, but it's an extra letter that the same word could have been expressed without that letter. You could have just written it like this, and the Torah decides to write it that way. So why is there an extra yud in the word formed when it comes to men? Yes, Tyler?
I mean, I'm just guessing here, but perhaps because God put more of himself in man than other creatures.
Beautiful. So the word yud in Hebrew, every letter has lots of different meanings. It has a phonetic meaning, and actually has a grammatical or numeric meaning, but also it has a graphic meaning. Like, imagine you were creating a language from scratch and you hired a graphic designer to design letters that express meaning by the shape of the letter. So if you were then assigned, please come up with a letter that describes spirituality. So how would you design that letter? So what I would want to do is I would want to leave it blank. Ink is something physical. You're trying to describe something that does not have any physical form. So I would just leave it blank. Except that when I would go back with my proposal, they would say, that's cheating, that doesn't work, that's the space between the words or between the lines. Like, you have to put something in ink because it's a letter. So then what I would do is I would take a drop of ink, the smallest amount possible, just that drop is the letter, and I would have it hovering at the top of the line. Or in other words, I would design a yud. You see, it's a little drop of ink and it's hovering at the top. That's the letter that represents spirituality. So you see that in the creation of man, there are two spiritual forces, while in the creation of animals, there's one spiritual animating force, what we call, the animal being alive. So once again, so this is actually pretty old midrashic teaching, quoted in the Ramchal. Rabbi Nachman bar Rabbi Chisda expounded what is meant by the text, then the Lord God formed Vayitzer man. The word Vayitzer, formed, is written with two yuds to show that God created two inclinations. There are two spiritual forces within a human being. One good and the other often translated as evil inclination. Evil is not really the best translation. It's more like broken inclination. So a part of you wants to accomplish great things, do great things, be good, do good, and another part of you is trying to sabotage that, literally. So first time we encounter this internal battle is usually as one's alarm clock goes off, and you set the alarm clock for a reason, right? You have a day full of important things to accomplish, which is why you set the alarm clock. But then when it goes off, it's not like all of you is so excited always to throw those covers to the other side of the room and jump out and do a little dance, because there's a part of you, an inner voice, sometimes stronger, sometimes louder, sometimes quieter, but there's an inner voice saying, no, just roll over and go back to sleep. Now that's not necessarily evil, but it's broken. It's not directing you to achieve your potential. It's sabotaging your potential. It's just taking the easy, comfortable, what I feel like doing versus what I actually want to be doing. So that is these two inclinations. We call them the Yetzer Tov, Yetzer Hara, or the good inclination and the broken inclination. Going back to the yeast in the dough. So if we try to think, how does the Yetzer Hara, this broken inclination, get us to do the things that we end up doing even though we don't want to? Okay, you have somebody who's diabetic, they don't want to be eating chocolate cake, and they go into the kitchen and they see this beautiful chocolate cake on the counter. And next thing you know, a very small sliver of the chocolate cake is missing. Now, how'd that happen? A person decided they are not going to be consuming chocolate cake, and then they just did. Like, what is the internal process that caused that to happen?
The evil soul.
Practically, psychologically, what's going on?
It's
It's chocolate, right?
And it's cake.
And it's cake. Well said, right? You don't need to say much more. Meaning, you look at it and you realize that if you take a little slice, obviously just a little slice, nothing crazy, but if you take a little sliver and you put it in your mouth, it's going to dissolve as it hits your tongue, and it's going to fill your mouth with this velvety, chocolatey flavor that's going to be absolutely life-changing as it just dissolves and hits every corner of your palate and your tongue. And it's like going to be the most incredible experience ever, and it's just a small sliver, and maybe another one after that, right? So you then take the slice, and it tastes good, maybe even really good, but nothing close to that image that you had in your brain as you were trying not to have the slice. Because what your Yetzer Hara did is it took this experience that had something positive, something pleasurable in it, and it blew it beyond any proportion. So there was something there, good flavor, but nothing like the image that it conjured, right? So what's an analogy for something that has some substance in it, but it's made to look like much more than it actually is? What in nature imitates that process? And examples, okay, you have a little bit of substance, but then it forms, takes this new form that looks like much more than is actually there.
This dough. Is this dough that like you start out with all the ingredients and then you add the yeast and then it just grows and grows and then you bake it and then you do bread.
Beautiful, well said. Meaning, when you make a dough, there's lots of nutrients in there. It's great. And then you let it rise and it gets this huge thing, but the nutrients haven't actually changed. It hasn't gotten more. It hasn't gotten bigger, right? It's just the presentation changed, and you think you're eating this huge thing when really you're eating the same thing that you would have eaten had you just stuck it in the oven right away. Obviously, it's going to taste much better if you let it rise, be fluffier, better, but it's also playing a mind game on you, making it look like much more than it actually is. So yeast in the dough is an analogy for the Yetzer Hara that presents the challenges that we have in life as much greater than they actually are, much more enticing than they actually are. People destroy their marriages with their imagination. They destroy their diets. They destroy their health. They destroy so many different things because of this Yetzer Hara, their careers, because of this Yetzer Hara that takes a challenge that they have and makes it look, right, you're lying in bed and your brain convinces you that getting out of bed is the hardest thing in the world. But really, all it does is you kind of just present yourself to gravity and you're out, right? But your brain tells you, try it. Kind of be at the edge of the bed and then do a little roll. You'll be out of bed, right? It's really not so hard. You can get a little hurt in the process. Try to put some cushions down before you do it. But it's really not so hard. But your brain, your Yetzer Hara, makes it look like this impossible task. Oh, there's no way I could do this. Impossible task. So going back to that prayer that he said, what's preventing us from doing what we really want to be doing? And instead we end up doing what we just feel like doing. It's the yeast in the dough. So Rashi says this symbolizes the Yetzer Hara, the drive to do evil or to make broken decisions, as we said before. So now, wrapping everything up, why does the Torah call Passover the holiday of matzah? Because matzah is the opposite of this. Matzah is the ability to say no to yeast, right? Not that yeast is inherently bad, but as an analogy, what it's analogous for is bad, and that is being enslaved to what we feel like doing at every given moment. And the power, the fortitude to say no to the quote-unquote yeast, to the inclination within us, the broken inclination that tries to make us make poor choices, that is the freedom that Passover is all about. Because when it does talk about freedom in Passover, you'll never see the Torah describe Passover as the holiday of dror. It's always the holiday of cherut. Because when we were taken out of Egypt, we immediately achieved dror. And Hashem said from the very beginning when he first spoke to Moses, it's never going to be about dror. Dror is the beginning of what we're really going for, which is going straight to Mount Sinai to get the Torah, which is going to help us get cherut. Because God says, I didn't take you out of Egypt in order for you to then go to the beach and spend the rest of your life in the beach like the image we saw before. Because you actually have tremendous potential. You can change the world. You can change history. You can be history. And therefore, I'm giving you dror as a first step, but what we're really going to focus on is cherut, is learning this ability to carve out bad options and to be able to say yes to the things that are going to help you achieve your true potential. It's the holiday of Cherut, the holiday of matzah, not of anything with yeast or anything leavened. It's the holiday of freedom to achieve our true potential. And just to end off, to see that God has a sense of humor, if you, when they were commissioning the Liberty Bell, which is going to be about American freedom, freedom to live wherever you want, do whatever you want, be whatever you want, which is what American freedom is all about, they wanted to put some sort of biblical verse on this bell that has the word freedom in it. So they were using a King James Bible, whatever English translation they used, which was obviously a translation of a translation of a translation of the Hebrew, and has the word freedom in it many, many times throughout the Torah. But of course, these are the word freedom in English, not the word freedom in Hebrew. There's lots of different words for freedom in Hebrew, but they always translate the same way in English. So they had no idea what they were looking at. They were just looking for the word freedom somewhere. Which one do you think God made sure that they picked?
Cherut.
Nope. Because Cherut is what American freedom is an opportunity for, but it's not what American freedom is all about. American freedom is about do whatever you want. It's the freedom of dror, right? So proclaim liberty throughout the land. That is that verse that we saw all the way at the beginning, Ukratem dror ba'aretz. They picked the one time that the Hebrews actually dror, message being, you have to be super appreciative of the opportunities that American freedom gives us, and to understand that it's the freedom to either spend your life in the beach or achieve greatness. And it's our job to make sure we use that freedom to achieve cherus. And that is what both Pesach and life are all about. Thank you.